Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 6 of our 6-part Kaladesh full set review. Today we're going to look at the colorless cards. In other words, we're going to look at the artifacts, which includes vehicles, as well as the non-basic lands. So if you have been watching the channel this week, you know that we have been looking at all of the cards in the set. We made it through the color pie and finished that up yesterday. Today we'll finish up the rest of the set. Tomorrow we'll be back with the pre-release primer video, which if you've watched any of my pre-release primers in the past, it's going to be pretty similar. I mean, a lot of it's the same type of information, but I like to put that out, especially for new players. But also in that video, I'm going to talk about inventions as well. So having said that, quickly before we get started, if you check out the description below, you'll see a link to the Amazon affiliate store for Heroes and Legends. And if you buy anything through any links, once you go through that store, a small percentage will come back to the channel to help support it. So as always, thank you to everyone who's made purchases through those links or are considering it. And also, again, thank you as always to the patrons on Patreon who make these videos possible. So without any further ado, let's get into the cards. We have a lot to talk about. I want to go at least sort of quick through them without compromising the information. In a nutshell, these cards today are going to be support cards for what the other archetypes are trying to do. Unfortunately, we're starting off a little slow with Accomplished Automation. This card, not super exciting, unfortunately. I promise it gets better than this. It just costs a lot for a 5/7 Fabricate 1 with, unfortunately, no other abilities, no evasion or anything like that. This card is not unplayable, though. I mean, there's certain decks in Limited that will still want this. Like, for example, if I have a control deck and I'm just really desperate for any sort of finisher and I'm getting towards the end of the draft and I still haven't found anything, this is still playable. Like, it still could do its job, but most of the time you're just going to leave this in the sideboard. Aetherflux Reservoir. This is a card that in Limited you might be able to find a little value out of if your deck's super cheap. Maybe you have a deck that's got a lot of smaller artifact plays, a lot of 2 and 3 drops. Then in that case, yeah, you know what, I might run it. It might not do tons for you at the 4 drop, but even if it gains you like 3, 5, 6 life over the course of the game, that could be a fine swing. It's not for all decks, right? You're going to have to really go in on this if you have a low mana curve. If you have a normal or higher mana curve, you'll probably want to avoid this in Limited. But in those situations, you might find some value out of this card. I mean, the paying 50 life, that's really not going to come into play in Limited, but gaining small amounts of life could potentially help you over time. Having said that, I do think there's some constructed possibilities for this card. I think Commander is probably the area where you'll be able to do some really crazy things with it. There are some kind of loop combos you could make to gain a whole bunch of life and then just basically win the game at that point. That could actually be kind of fun to try to put together, right? Some people have been trying to brew this for Standard as well as Modern too, or at least slide it into like a Soul Sisters deck in Modern. I don't know in Modern if it's going to be fast enough, unfortunately. I haven't tested it though in Soul Sisters to see. I like to kind of see how somebody incorporates it in there and if they can make it work. That could be cool. But aside from that, I do think there could be a Standard deck out there. Again, it's a little early to tell if the decks that are brewed with this are going to be fast enough for the meta game, where there will probably be some relatively aggressive decks, I think. So I guess that remains to be seen. But overall, this card definitely has a home in Commander. If nowhere else, I think there's a lot of really fun things you could do with it. Next, we have Aetherworks Marvel. Now, this is a mythic, you won't see it all the time, but in Limited, if you have a deck that's creating a fair amount of energy, this will be very, very, very good for you. Now, if you're not in that deck, maybe you're in Orzhov colors or something, then okay, maybe this sits in your sideboard. But if you're in Simic or isn't, you just have a lot of ways to get energy. This is a really nice payoff for that energy. I mean, 6 energy to look at the next 6 cards in your library and basically cast the best one for free. That's pretty awesome, right? I really like this payout. As far as Limited goes, like I said, very good in the right deck. As far as Standard goes, I do think we'll see some Standard play. I mean, imagine if you can create a little bit of energy in the early game and then later on like hit something like Emrakul with this. And it's nice because it does cast the card for free, so you still get the cast ability, which is pretty awesome. So I think that deck could be out there. It just depends on how some of the early energy cards will work and if they can kind of keep up with the meta game, which I feel like might be a little bit faster now with this set coming out. I guess we'll see. But at some point, I do think that could be something we do see in Standard. This is another card that could be good in Commander too, as long as you can incorporate enough energy production into your Commander deck. What's awesome in Commander is you can have some really crazy targets you could hit with this thing for sure. Animation Module. This is a card that I would play in limited if I'm in the green deck. The green deck is all about adding counters and stuff. And for 1 mana, I think there could be enough value here in the mid to late game where you can make some extra tokens and just kind of gum up the ground a little bit, and while your big creatures can just trample across, get their damage in. Also, that second ability, albeit a little expensive, will sometimes have applications. I mean, just adding another +1/+1 counter, or if you're super lucky and you happen to open a Nissa, then you can start adding loyalty counters. Technically, if you had enough mana, you could ultimate her the turn she came into play. If you had this, that's interesting. Very rare, but interesting. So this card does do some things in the green style deck. However, if you're not in that style and you don't have enough targets for this, I'm probably going to avoid it. Also, I think in standard, I don't know if we'll quite get there. It is cheap, which is nice, but at the same time, it is relying on other things happening. It's relying on +1/+1 counters being placed on permanents, and it's also relying on the fact that you have expendable mana to pay to get the tokens, and it's taking into account that those tokens will make a difference at the current board state. There's just a lot of ifs there that make me feel like the card might have too high of a level of variance for standard. Aside from that, though, what I really like about this card, I think this could be awesome in Commander, just because Commander, you have a little more freedom to build decks that create counters all over the place on different things, right? Like, there's already Commander decks that do that. So just slide a copy of this in, and you can find some crazy value, right? And it's any kind of counter, which is cool. So not only is it like +1/+1 counters, but you can use this on -1/-1 counters on your opponent's creatures, or you can use this on experience counters, which were from the Commander products that came out last year, or else you can use this on the poison counters if that's your business, right? So there's just a lot of different things. Energy counters, of course, from this set. A lot of different things you could be doing with it in a format like that. That opens up for a lot of fun gameplay ideas. So yeah, I like it for a lot of different reasons. Okay, maybe not a standard card necessarily, but it definitely has its uses. Aradara Express. It's our first vehicle of the day. Unfortunately, I'm not real excited about this one. This is maybe one of the not so good ones. Here's my problem with this particular one. It's very expensive for what it's doing, I think. 5 mana and a crew 4. That's what really kind of breaks it for me. For a menace 8/6 creature. Now granted, are there going to be times you can crew this up? Maybe 2 for 1 with this? Yeah, sure. There are. But I just feel like it's a huge commitment. That crew 4 just feels painful to me. Sometimes that will be fine, but other times it won't be. And when it won't be, you don't want to be stuck playing this 5 casting cost do nothing card, basically. So you do have to also think when you look at vehicles that they aren't creatures. Even though they have a power and toughness, they're not creatures because it takes another resource to turn them on. You do have to think of them more as equipment, for example. So when you're looking at your creature count versus your non-creature count when you're building a limited deck, definitely make sure you're putting these in the non-creature count side. So that means you only have so much space available for vehicles, so you want to use the best ones. Now this is a common, you'll see it floating around a lot, but there's much better commons, and of course there's great rares, even a pretty good uncommon or two that we're going to be looking at. This one is very, very low on the list to include, unfortunately. Ballista Charger. Now this one I can get behind a little more. This one costs 5 for 6/6. It only costs 3 to crew, which I know it's only a difference of 1, but I really think there's a big difference between 3 and 4, quite honestly, when it comes to crewing things. And when this attacks, it also can do a point of damage to a creature or player. So there are going to be a lot of 1 toughness creatures, servo tokens, stopper tokens, that type of thing. So if your opponent's plan is just chump block this with tokens, that plan is going to run out much quicker because you're able to take out 2 tokens a turn with this if it's attacking in and they're chumping. So I do like this a fair amount for limited. It is an uncommon versus what we saw before as a common vehicle, but really we're also going to see some really good common vehicles coming up too. So this is very, very limited playable, I think. Bastion Mastodon. We're going to find a whole cycle of these that are artifact creatures that if you pay a particular color, they get a bonus. Some of them are actually really good. This one I'm not super hyped on, just because it's kind of expensive, I think, for what it does. A 4/5 for 5 is okay, and if I have the white mana to give it vigilance, okay, it's maybe a little better if I'm in white, but I'm not super thrilled with this card. There's just so many really good cards at the 5 spot that I just can't see myself like working this into a lot of decks, quite honestly, unless I'm really desperate for a creature at 5. And not to say that it would be horrible if you played it. It would do its job, I think, but it's just one of those cards that you're going to find better stuff most of the time. Bomat Bizarre Barge. Here's another uncommon that I can really get behind. I like this a lot. 4 casting costs, 5/5. Again, it's a crew 3, which is right on that cusp, but I still think very playable. And when it enters the battlefield, you also get to draw a card. So it replaces itself when you play it. That's pretty cool. And again, we know there's a lot of flicker effects or bounce effects in the set. You might be able to take advantage of that enters the battlefield effect a little bit too sometimes. But regardless, whether you can or can't, I still think this is a very serviceable vehicle at the uncommon spot. Bomat Courier. This is kind of an interesting card. When I first saw this, I was kind of low on it, but the more I've looked at it, the more I've kind of increased my like of this card. As far as limited goes, I probably won't play it. I still think it doesn't do quite enough in limited, because basically, first off, it's probably going to be a one of, because it's a rare. So if you have one of these in your deck, I mean, the odds of you getting early enough in the game to be able to attack in and make a difference is pretty slight. And let's say you do get lucky, you attack in a couple times with it, you set a couple cards off to the side, then later on you're going to have to use the ability to discard your hand. This thing will still have to be alive to do it, and then once you do it, you're probably discarding some cards to exchange for the other cards. It just feels like you're jumping through a lot of hoops for not much of a result. But where this card has grown on me a little bit is standard. I do think that when I first saw this, I wasn't sure if this would really do enough, but I'm starting to feel like there could be a deck that wants this. If there's a super aggressive deck that's really going to empty its hand very quick and you can run multiples of these in the deck, then that's a different story. You might be able to build up a bigger amount of cards that you could exchange later in the game, especially if you have some like direct damage or just removal to back it up a little bit so it gets across in the early game. It could be interesting there. So I don't know if the deck will exist or not. I am pretty certain that there's going to be more aggressive decks, especially red decks, coming up in the format. So maybe it just kind of fits into one of those. I guess we'll have to kind of wait and see. But it is a card I probably would try to shy away from most of the time in limited, I think. Chief of the Foundry. Now here's a good card for both standard and limited. As a matter of fact, this card is currently standard legal, and it does see standard play. It was seeing more standard play, I think, a few months back, but it does still see some, and some isn't decks that are running some artifacts. So this card is only going to get better now that we're dumping a whole bunch of great artifacts into the standard scene, right? So first off, in limited, yes, very playable. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of really strong artifact creatures. We'll be seeing them as we go through here, that it almost feels like they're trying to make like a slower version of Affinity for standard. So there is perhaps a draftable deck around cards like that. Notice this is at uncommon, so you might be able to pick up a couple of these. That could be very, very interesting. Now, there are going to be times where you don't have a whole lot of artifact creatures, and if that's the case, then okay, you don't play this card. But many times you will have enough, especially considering Fabricate with all the servo tokens and stuff, for this to really make a difference. It will be very good most of the time in limited. When you get to standard, like I said, it's already standard playable, and it's just going to become more standard playable. This is a very good card. We've kind of seen already what this can do, so I'm probably not saying anything you probably don't know about it, but it's cool that they brought it back. I'd like to see this continue to stay in the format now with all these new cards around it. Cogsworth Puzzle Knot. Some of these puzzle knots are kind of painful, quite honestly. Like, I feel like they're just asking to pay so much for what they're doing. Now, there are some cards that having artifacts on the battlefield matter, and we'll be looking at some of those cards as we go forward. So there are certain situations where running a couple of these might make sense because it's going to combo well with something else. So sure, keep that in mind. And also, obviously, if you're on color, you're going to get more value out of it than if you're not on color. But let's look at this one in particular. I mean, you're paying 2 for a 1/1 token, and then you're paying another white and 1 for another 1/1 token. To me, okay, granted, maybe I can exploit the enters the battlefield effect and try to get an extra token out of it at some point, but I'm just doing a lot of work for another 1/1 token. I mean, there's other cards out there that we've seen recently that give you 2 tokens for 2 mana, right? So I just feel like I'm paying a lot for this ability. I'm probably skipping this unless I'm really in a desperate need for some cheap artifacts. Consulate Skygates. This is okay in slower decks. I think most of the time I'm going to board this in if I'm up against a lot of flyers. But if I'm in a slower, more grindy build, this is an okay defender, especially against a deck that's more aggressive. But a lot of the time, let's face it, I'm probably not going to start with this in my deck. I'm going to try to go a little more aggressive. Cultivator's Caravan. Here's another vehicle I really, really like. Granted, this one's a rare, but you know what? How many times have we played a mana rock where you pay 3, tap for a mana of any color? I mean, that's a very playable card. That's what this is. Oh, but by the way, if you crew 3, it becomes a 5/5 creature till end of turn. That's awesome, right? Not only can it fix your mana, it can ramp you a little bit, and then, you know, later in the game when that's not important anymore, you just crew this thing up and start beating in with it. 5/5 is a very sizable creature, so I really like this card a lot. I think it's awesome and limited. This will definitely see standard play too. I think it's just that good. Deadlock Trap. This is another card for me that will probably come out of the sideboard when I need it. I mean, it is good against Planeswalkers. It is something that's going to require energy, and I just feel like there's so many good energy payouts in this set that I don't know if I want to use it on a more defensive card. Like, I feel like I really want to go offensive with the energy, because the energy is a bonus on top of what I can already play out of my hand with my mana. So I don't know, I to sit back and be more defensive feels a little weird to me, but there are times where there's going to be a card or two in your opponent's pool that's blowing you out. Then you go ahead and just board this in as long as you can back it up with the energy, and it will be okay in those situations, but I think it's more of a sideboard card. Decoction Module. This is kind of a fun card. I mean, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, getting a piece of energy is cool in the long term. It's not like huge amounts of energy. I mean, we are going to see some cards that sometimes will give you 3 energy when they enter the battlefield, and even more sometimes when they leave the battlefield. So like, there's probably more ways to get energy that are more efficient, but at the same time, I think this is okay if you're going in with a strategy of maybe fabricate and energy together. For example, maybe you're in like a Dimir build or something like that, right, where you have both those pieces kind of clicking. Then in that case, yeah, this is a card that's playable and limited. This is one of those cards that you kind of draft again, and if you have those pieces and it shows up, wonderfully, you kind of pick it up. It might not be a card you first pick, right, until you kind of know what you're going to end up getting. Also, that second ability is pretty decent in the late game to help you defend yourself against some spot removal, stuff like that. And also it helps with bouncing creatures for some enters battlefield effects. So again, it works really good to fabricate and other energy creation cards too. And if you have another really good energy payoff, again, another reason to play this card. So having said all that, it's not going to make every build, but it can do some work for you in limited. As far as standard goes, I think it just depends on how efficient this is going to be versus other types of energy creation cards in standard. I kind of feel like there's more efficient ones, so at this point I'd say I don't really know if this one will quite make the cut when there's other ones out there that do additional things like direct damage to a creature, or just give you a benefit of having a creature, for example, when it enters the battlefield. This one makes you jump through a few more hoops, and because of that, I think it's more of a limited card, or definitely a special like build around me card, maybe for commander or something like that. Demolition Stomper. This is another vehicle I'm not super excited about. This one isn't uncommon, but I don't know, crew 5 again, ouch, that just does not feel good to me. It's a big creature, I mean 10-7, and also you can't chump block it, which is kind of nice with small creatures. So creatures power 2 or less can't touch the thing when it's coming in. That's nice, but again, paying 6 and then crewing 5, I just feel like there's better things you can be doing, quite honestly. Dukara Peafowl. I actually like this a lot. Like, I'm a sucker for these type of artifacts that you can pay 1 to get flying. Like, I've played with cards like this in the past and they've been good, so this one I really want to be good. I mean, even if I don't have blue, like 2/4 for 4 isn't the worst thing in the world. Like, that's fine. But if I have blue to pay into it to be able to make that flying, I think is actually really cool, because it can block decent sized flyers, it can get in for damage itself. I think this is at least one of my favorite common artifacts, if nothing else, in the set. I think this can do some work for you. Dynavolt Tower. Here's another really good energy payoff. And again, look, 5 energy, tap to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. It gives you 2 energy every time you cast an instant or sorcery. So whether you have a lot of instants or sorceries, or maybe you just have other ways to create energy, that's a really nice payoff. So don't feel like you have to like have some crazy Is It Spells deck for this to be good. You just have to have some amount of energy generation, right? So if you're comfortable with the amount of energy generation you have, run this. You'll be very happy. It only costs 3. That's nice. If you're not, then skip it, right? You don't want this doing nothing. It's going to be better if you probably are in the Izzet deck, for example, with a few more instants and sorceries. But like I said, there's other ways to get energy too. So I do think this is a fine card for limited. Standard, I think this actually could see some standard play. I mean, right now there's a tempo Izzet deck, and you probably could switch out a few cards in that deck and make it a deck that could create energy and then use this as a payoff. That wouldn't completely shock me. So we'll have to kind of see if that works out in the meta, but I think it's very possible. Eager Construct. I usually am very high on 2/2s for 2. This one I'm not as high on. Here's my problem with it. It is a symmetrical effect, and you get the benefit of the effect last. So everybody scries, and then everyone draws before you're going to draw, probably, most of the time, right? Now, having said that, the 2-drop is an incredibly important part of your deck. And there's going to be times where you're going to have to play this because you just need a 2/2 for 2. It's an incredibly important part of your curve. So it's by no stretch of the imagination unplayable. In fact, a lot of times you're going to find yourself playing it. It's going to be just fine for you. But if you have other options, I would probably go with the other options. Electrostatic Pummeler. This one, I don't know. I've looked at this card a lot. And you kind of want to go to Magical Christmas Land all the time with this card and be like, wow, I could like become huge. But then you have to think about, well, is that really ever going to happen? So here's my thoughts on it. This is where I've landed anyway for now. I guess we'll see once we play with it. It does create a fair amount of energy. 3 energy for 3 mana. I kind of like that. So if I'm looking for a way to get more energy and this is available to me, maybe it's a thing I use from time to time. Paying into it, though, where I could be paying into some of these other really cool cards, doesn't feel super great to me, because yes, it gets big, but it doesn't have like trample or evasion, so that's a problem. And not only do I have to pay the energy to really make it a thing, but I also have to have other ways to pump it, which could be better in a green deck. So maybe if I'm playing green, this becomes a lot more playable, perhaps. That could be something to think about. As a matter of fact, I might be much more happy drafting this late in the draft if I'm already all in on like the counters and the energy generation that comes with green. But I think most of the time you're probably going to leave this one in your sideboard. Also, too, I think even in standard, it's just going to take too many hoops and too much variance to really get this thing off the ground. Fabrication Module. This one's cool, I think, because it's another one of those cards that I feel like is going to combo well with other cards in the set. And whenever you get energy counters, so whether it be 1 or more at any given time, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. And also you can pay mana into this to get energy. So this is one of the few ways that you can directly kind of pay mana for energy directly. It's not a lot, and it's not a great exchange rate, but you can do it. So I find that interesting. So I do think this is playable in certain decks. Again, if you have a lot of ways to get energy, this all of a sudden becomes very good for you. If you don't, skip it, and don't rely on paying 4 and tapping for the 1 energy to be a efficient energy creation tool, because it won't be. But if you have other ways to get energy, this could be fine. As far as standard goes, again, I feel like this could see play if there's a really all-in energy deck that shows up in standard. If the meta can get there, then this potentially could get there with it. Filigree Familiar. I really like this card a lot. I mean, a lot of people see this and are like, oh, it's a 2/2 for 3. But I think the upside's enough. I mean, the 2 life is fine. And also, when it dies, you get to draw a card, so it kind of does replace itself eventually. And to me, that's worth it. I think that's worth the 3 mana. I feel quite good playing this card in Limited. Fireforger's Puzzle Knot. I'm going to side this in if I have red mana and I'm up against a lot of tokens. Servo tokens, Thopter tokens, whatever. Other than that, I'm probably not going to touch this one. Fleet Wheel Cruiser. I like this one a lot. Now, again, it's a rare. I get it. You're not going to see it all the time, but you're paying 4. It has Trample and Haste, and when it enters the battlefield, it comes in as an artifact creature, so you can attack in immediately without having to worry about crewing it. 5/3, I mean, it feels a lot like Juggernaut-style stats, and after the first turn's over, if the thing's still alive, crew is only 2. So I feel really good with this card. I mean, the trample, the haste, the fact that I can just attack with it, it's not just kind of sitting on the battlefield when I first play it. This is kind of cool. This one I think is good enough to see some standard play, and a very good vehicle to pick up in limited. Foundry Inspector. This is another card that don't underestimate this in limited as long as you have a fair amount of artifact spells. But you know what? Even if you don't, it's a 3/2 for 3. So like if I play a 3/2 for 3 and I have 1 or 2 other artifact spells in my deck, wonderful. I might get extra value out of my 3/2 for 3. So this is very, very limited playable. Gets better obviously with the more artifacts that you have. Also, as far as standard goes, I do feel like they're trying to create this like slow affinity style standard deck. Like they're giving you the pieces. I mean, we saw the creature that gives the +1/+1 to artifact creatures. Now we have the creature that's making all the artifact spells 1 less to cast. So like they're trying to bring that value to the table. Now doing it with 3 drops is going to make it slow enough that it won't be like the affinity we know obviously for modern or legacy, right? It will be much more manageable for the standard environment, but it could get there, and I have no doubt regardless this card will see play in standard. It's another good card to pick up too if you're all in on artifacts, perhaps in a commander deck or something like that. Ghirapur Orrery. Let's talk about limited first with this one. I don't think you want to play it there. I think it's just too hard to break the symmetry of this card. I feel like maybe if I'm just super low curve, I could try, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be at all consistent, unfortunately. Now, standard, this is a very powerful effect. So could somebody get it to work to their advantage? Perhaps. Again, the level of variance is a little tricky, but if you could just create a deck that's really meant to dump its hand as quickly as possible, maybe this could do a little bit of work. I mean, it does cost 4 mana, so it's kind of a mid-range play that even if you do dump your hand really early, you might not even have this in play yet. That might feel weird, but as long as you can get this in play and then empty out your hand, there's tons of value to be had here. So I think it remains to be seen if somebody can find a efficient way to do that in standard. If they can, then maybe this does see play. Being 4 mana, it puts it in an awkward spot in modern too, because again, I think you could find ways to dump your hand quick in modern, but at the same time, this costing 4, there might be a lag before it's actually in play and doing anything for you. And then again, you also have the variance of what if your opponent's dump their hand too, or you're in a mirror or something like that. So it feels a little strange, but I do think someone will find something to do with this, because I feel like the payoff is really good if you can make it happen. Glassblower's Puzzle Knot. This one may be my favorite of the Puzzle Knots. Not to say it's like super amazing or anything, but this one feels at least semi-playable to me. If I have blue to pour into this, at least I'm getting energy. Like, that's kind of nice. Like, okay, I play it, I get 2 energy. Later I can sacrifice to get 2 energy. That's actually pretty cool. I get to scry 2 twice when I play it, and then later on, so I actually like that a lot. Again, it's not a card you're always going to include. There's probably going to be better things you can be doing at the 2-drop some of the time. But if you're all in on energy and you're looking to dig a little deeper into your deck, really, who isn't? I think this is okay. This is runnable, at least in blue. Inventor's Goggles. For some reason, I had a block in my mind of this card all week, because a couple times I had mentioned that there's only one piece of equipment in the set, and I mentioned the other one that we're going to look at in a few minutes, but there's actually a second piece, and this is actually the better one, so I don't know why I didn't remember this one. I forget the other one, but go figure. So this is actually pretty decent. It costs 1, 2 to equip, +1/+2. I think that's fair. The Artificer piece probably won't come into play all too often. This will shine a little more with those creatures that get bigger when they have artifacts in play. So it'd be nice to play this for 1 and then play those creatures, equip them, so on and so forth. This also works pretty decently, I think, with the servo tokens and stuff. So yeah, this is a fine limited card for sure. Iron League Steed. This is actually really cool. I like this card a lot. If you want a solid artifact creature that can slide into any deck, this is nice. I mean, a 3/3 haste creature or a 2/2 haste with a 1/1 token for 4 mana, I feel like those are good stats either way. I even feel like this could be standard playable in an aggressive deck. Just the haste aspect of playing a 3/3 on turn 4, but it can attack in on that turn, just feels like it's maybe slightly ahead of curve. I like this one quite a bit, so I would pick this relatively high, I think, in a draft. Key to the City. Here's another card I like quite a bit too. When I first saw this previewed, I guess I had to wrap my head around it a little bit. I was kind of unsure about it, I think, but the more I've had time to think about this card, the more I've actually liked it. Being able to discard a card, maybe a land card later in the game or something, and to make the best creature that your opponent has not be able to block, really hopefully will allow you to get some damage across, and then next turn for 2 mana you get to draw another card. So it helps you speed through your deck a little bit. Granted, it does cost some mana, but it does let you speed through your deck and also get damage across. So for 2 mana, I'm on board with this. I mean, you play this on turn 2, it's probably not going to do anything right away, but a little bit later in the game, I think this will yield you some really strong benefits in Limited. Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot. This one, another one just doesn't feel good. Like, okay, I pay 2 and a life and it replaces itself, and then I pay another black and 2 to lose another life and draw a card. I mean, I love drawing cards, don't get me wrong, but paying a black and 4 to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life, like, really? Like, what happened to the days of paying 2 black to do that? Or even 2 black and 1 would be okay with me. But yeah, this just feels really, really slow, unfortunately. I think most of the time you'll want to steer clear of this one. Metalwork Colossus. This is another card we've talked a lot about over the course of the week. I think this is a really cool card. I mean, first off, it's another card, much like Emrakul in some ways, that almost feels unobtainable at first, but the more you play the game and kind of build around it, it becomes a lot easier to cast and becomes very achievable. Also, too, if it ends up in the graveyard, you can sacrifice a couple servo tokens, get it back to your hand, so it becomes a reoccurring threat. I think that's actually pretty good. It doesn't have trample, unfortunately. It can be chump blocked by servo tokens for days, which doesn't feel great, but it's still a real big creature that eventually is going to take over if your opponent can't deal with it in some other way, especially if you can keep bringing it back. That's actually pretty cool. Also, too, we have in white, there's a card Refurbish, which could combo with this. Now, granted, they're both rares. You're not going to see that a lot in Limited, but if you're really lucky, you could potentially get this in your graveyard and play it for 4. So that's a thing, potentially, too. But overall, I do think this is great for you in Limited when you can play it. And this may be one reason to play 1 or 2 bad puzzle knots to maybe get this out a little bit cheaper, who knows. But again, I still think there's better things you can be doing most of the time. Other cheap artifacts you can play that will actually do something else. But this is also a card that I think we'll see play in Standard. Now, when you get to Modern, you have other options, like you have Blightsteel Colossus, you have the big Colossuses that trample, stuff like that. So unfortunately, I think there's better options there, even though you might be able to cast this one a little quicker than some of the others. I think some of the others just are going to overpower it in those formats. Multiform Wonder. Here's another creature I really, really like. Another great artifact creature. If you're playing the energy game, you got a lot of play here. I mean, there's a lot you can do with this thing. It's versatility. It comes back to they're giving you options. Options are always good. They make the card more powerful, right? Even if I'm not playing the energy game, I get 3 energy, and maybe next turn I pay 1 to give it flying, I pay 1 to give it lifelink, and if there's no blockers, I pay 1 to give it +2/+1. I can attack in with a 5/1 flying lifelink creature. Yeah, sign me up. That's actually kind of awesome. So yeah, I think this is a very good card. This is great in Limited. I think this could see Standard play too. Narnim Cobra. Good as long as you can pay green into it. Like, if I can't pay green into it, it's okay. Like, if I need a creature, it's there. But if I can pay green, it becomes a very good creature, because 2/1 Death Touch creatures, even if they are tying up your mana a little bit, are still very, very strong. Oval Chase Dragster. I think this is the first vehicle they previewed a couple weeks ago, and you know, obviously there's a lot of excitement around it because it was the first vehicle, and I had time to think about it. At first I was kind of like, it seems okay, but the more I look at it, I actually really like this one too for Limited. It kind of has that ball lightning sort of feel to it, where you don't have to sacrifice it, but you're attacking it with a 6/1 haste creature, so pretty much your opponent's going to block it, take the trample damage, and go about their day. But what I do like about this is it only costs 4. It's only 1 to crew. You're at least going to get some damage across and at least make a trade for the most part. And if for some reason your opponent can't deal with it the turn it comes out and you get in for 6 damage, then next time you get in for even like another 4, like that's actually pretty significant. So this card I do feel like is great and Limited. May even see some Standard play. I think it could be strong enough at the 4 spot.
Panharmonicon.
This is a cool card just because I think it's already captured a lot of people's imaginations about all the different things you can do with the artifact or creature enters the battlefield triggered abilities. I mean, to get an extra triggered ability, that's pretty awesome. This set has a lot of opportunity. Again, Fabricate is a big piece of the set. Just getting energy when things come into the battlefield, that's a big part of this set. So there's things you can do with it. Now, much like a card we talked about a little earlier, this is one of those cards that sometimes is not going to be great for you in Limited if you just don't have a lot of opportunities to take advantage of it, because this is costing 4 and really doesn't do anything on its own. That's usually a red flag. However, if you have the right deck, I think it's still worth running, because if I can get extra energy out of this thing, if I can get extra tokens out of this thing, or whatever it is, it actually feels good to me. So again, this is another card that maybe feels better like if you're already drafting that deck and it shows up in pack 3 or something, then it's going to feel like a real good pull, as opposed to opening this pack 1 and having to decide between this and the big removal spell. I'm probably going to take the big spell or maybe the big kind of bomb creature over this, just because I just don't know yet if my deck's going to be able to take advantage of it, and that's always awkward. But there are times it'll be good. There's times you just won't play it. When it comes to Standard, again, it's going to be contingent upon how good Fabricate is and how good Energy is in Standard, how fast it is, and if it will even need this card at some point. Because you reach a point where maybe it's just good enough on its own and it doesn't want to use this as a 4-drop. It might not matter as much at that point in the game. So that it remains to be seen, I guess. We'll kind of have to see how the meta shapes out there. I think this is awesome for Commander, though. Like, I can think of a lot of fun stuff you can do with this in Commander, so I'm sure a lot of people have been brewing Commander decks around this already. And I have seen people trying to brew some Standard, and they're coming up with some interesting stuff, too. So I don't want to completely count it out. I mean, there's actually some good ideas around this card. I guess we'll just have to see what happens. Perpetual Timepiece. This is not really good in Limited. I mean, there's not a whole lot of good reasons to mill yourself, and hopefully the game and the format's not so slow that you have to put your shuffle your graveyard back into your library. Hopefully that won't be necessary. That's never fun. But what this is for, perhaps, is in Standard, if there is a grindy control deck, then this might be something they want to run just to keep their library stocked if the game does go along. Prakata Pillarbug. This is a fine 3-drop. I mean, 2/3 for 3, and if I have black mana, I can give it lifelink every once in a while. That's actually pretty good, I think. So, fine card for Limited. Not too much more to say about it. Prophetic Prism. This is really good if you're trying to splash a 3rd color. Like, I don't really feel like this is like the 4-color or 3-color format or anything like that, because you have so many artifacts to choose from. There's not a whole lot of need to dip into other colors, but there might be a need to splash colors sometimes, and that's what this is for. It's nice because this replaces itself as well, so you get a little additional value there for 2 mana, and it's great in that situation. Now, if you don't need to splash, then okay, you're probably not going to play this, but that's why it's there, and it'll be nice sometimes. Renegade Freighter. Now, here's a common vehicle I can get behind. The one we saw earlier, I wasn't super excited about. This one's pretty cool. Paying 3 for a 4/3 with a crew 2. Yeah, sign me up. As a matter of fact, when it attacks as a 5/4 trampler. All right, yeah, that's awesome, right? So this is a very aggressive, and for what you're getting here, I think very cheaply costed card. So I don't mind playing this in Limited, and I think it's good enough to see Standard play too. Scrap Heap Scrounger. Good aggressive card, I think, for Limited. It costs 2. It's a 3/2. Granted, it can block, but this card doesn't want to block. This card wants to get in the red zone and fight. And also, if you have black mana and you have other creatures going to your graveyard, you have a little bit of recursion going on. It's kind of hard to deal with. So that's always nice, and that's basically the reason they don't want it to block. I think this is also good enough for Standard if there is a aggressive deck running black, maybe Dimir or something like that. If that happens in the meta game in Standard, then I think this could potentially get there. But yeah, if nothing else, very, very happy to play this in Limited if I'm going aggro. Self-Assembler. I think this is good and Limited as long as you can get a couple copies. 1 copy maybe not too exciting, but if you get a 2nd copy that you can search up when you play the 1st, that's pretty good. And I think optimally you kind of want 3 of these, and they're common, so you should be able to find them hopefully most of the time, as long as no one else is drafting them. But I do think they'll be quite good in pairs of 2 or even in 3s. In that case, one maybe or maybe not makes the cut, but multiples, yeah, run them. It just brings a lot of heat to the table. You're able to populate the battlefield with 4/4s very quickly, and sometimes that's just enough to kind of overrun your opponent. As far as standard goes, this does combo really well with Foundry Inspector. I mean, imagine playing this for cheaper, right? And we also have the Artifact Lord we saw earlier, which we can also potentially give a +1/+1. So, I don't know. I do feel like that Affinity-esque style deck, again, could be a thing in Standard. If it can get there, then this might see play in it. Sky Skiff. Now, this is another common vehicle that feels really, really good to me. 2 casting cost, 2/3, flying, crew 1. So you can basically turn one of your tokens into a 2/3 flyer with this card. I think that's awesome. This is great for limited, and I think this will see standard play as well. I think it's that good. Sky Sovereign, console flagship. Now here's the mythic vehicle of the day, and this one is awesome. I mean, first off, look at it this way. Even if I can't turn this thing on, I play it for 5 and I get to do 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Like, for 5 mana, that doesn't feel horrible and limited. On top of that, later on, if I can crew this thing, it just is bonkers. A 6/5 flyer that every time it attacks, it deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. It's just never letting up. It's just relentless. If your opponent can't deal with this thing, or perhaps stop you from crewing it somehow, they're going to eventually lose the game. It's just too much to take. It's a constant barrage. It feels a little bit like Inferno Titan in that way. Inferno Titan was very, very powerful, obviously. If you played with it, you know. This card feels a little bit like that card. Now, granted, it's not as streamlined as that card is. I mean, that's a super efficient card, probably a little too good. This card fits into the current standard environment, but it's super pushed. I mean, let's face it. I mean, this is kind of like the one of the key cards of the set, and Wizards wants this to be seen on camera, I think, at the Pro Tour, right? They pushed it to the point where, yes, this will see standard play, and if you're lucky enough to open this in limited, this thing is going to be a huge bomb for you. Fantastic card. Smuggler's Copter. Now, this to me might be my favorite card in the set as far as power level. This thing costs 2, 3/3 flyer, and it's only a crew 1 vehicle. And on top of that, whenever it attacks or blocks, you can loot if you want to. Yeah, all that for 2 mana. Like 2 mana. I mean, that's crazy, right? And I love the fact that it's only a crew 1. This is a limited bomb. This card is incredible. It's a rare, so okay, you won't see it all the time. But if you're lucky enough to get this thing, this is going to do some crazy work for you. This is also maybe one of the most powerful cards in the set for standard, in my opinion. How can I get the most out of my resources? And this is it. I mean, this is it. 2 mana for all of this. This card is going to be a force. Get used to seeing this quite a bit if you play standard. I think it's going to show up in a lot of places. Incredible, incredible card. I think it's good enough for modern play even. I think it's that strong. This is going to be the vehicle that perhaps can make that jump over to modern. Again, also awesome in other formats like Commander. Throw this in cubes if you want to add a vehicle element to more powerful cubes. Incredible card. I can't say enough good stuff about it. Snarethopter, another really good 4-drop creature. Like, this is fine for me. Like a 3/2 flying haste for 4. I'm on board. Sign me up. And that's why I was kind of saying before, some of those other cards that feel like they do some really cool things, but they're relying on other cards, they all cost 4 too. So then it's kind of like, am I really going to take the risk on one of those cards, or am I just going to throw just this in my deck, right? Because this, I know what this is going to do, and this is going to do work most of the time, right? Great card for limited. Potentially could maybe even see some standard play in the right deck. Again, if that affinity style-esque deck can get there, I think this could see some play there. Torch Gauntlet. Here's the other piece of equipment that this is the one I remembered. This one costs 2. If you equip a creature, it gets +2/+0, and it only costs 2 to equip. So maybe not as cool as the last one because it's slightly more pricey, and it doesn't help your toughness any. But I do think this is cool in limited for a couple situations. One, servo tokens or Thopter tokens. I think this is great with those type of cards, and I also think it's very good again with those artificers that get bigger when there's already an artifact in play. They do synergize well with a lot of things that are happening in the set, so might not always make your cut, but there's a lot of times this will be really cool. Wells Fast Monitor. nothing to write home about here. Again, another serviceable 3-drop. 3/2 for 3 is just fine. If you can pay the red into it for Menace, yeah, that's okay too. I mean, it's not super exciting. It's not quite as good as maybe some of the others in this cycle, but it's playable and limited for sure. Whirler Maker. Now, this is a tad pricey. It costs 3 and then 4 every time to activate. But if you're in the right limited deck, like, I think this could do some work. Now, this isn't something you're going to run all the time. Be very careful, because if you're in a more aggressive deck or even up against a more aggressive deck, this is going to be too slow in some situations. But if you can defend yourself in the early game, maybe you have some of those cheap blockers that are going to gum up the board a little bit, this can do a lot of work in the late game, especially for a more controlling build. So I do think there are decks out there that will be happy to play this. Even though it's a little slow, if you can gum up the game enough, you can start to just slowly garner advantage over a period of time, to the point where if your opponent doesn't deal with this, they're going to eventually be overwhelmed. So again, it's for a very specific style deck, and if you're not playing that deck, I'd probably leave it in the sideboard. But if you are, this could be okay for you. Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot. This is okay if you're looking for energy and you have green to put into it, because, I mean, I don't know, a green and 4 for 6 energy, that might be a good enough payoff. I mean, the life is fine too. 6 life, I mean, that kind of adds up as well. So this maybe is my second favorite Puzzle Knot, but again, I'm overall kind of low on these. But again, it does have its place. If you're trying to find energy, this will be sufficient. Workshop Assistant. On its own in a vacuum, it's not super exciting because it's a 1/2 body for 3, even though when it dies you can return another artifact from the graveyard to your hand. But this is more exciting, obviously, if you have a lot of targets for this. So if you're playing limited and you have a whole bunch of artifact creatures, for example, and you just want to find value, this could be okay to run like a 1-of. Also, it potentially could see some standard play. Again, it kind of works well with a lot of the other artifact creatures we've seen. Feels like they're trying to give us a deck there, as long as it can hang with the other aggressive decks in the meta. Alright, let's move on to Ether Hub. And this is actually kind of cool. It gives you energy when it enters the battlefield, and then if you tap it and pay energy, you get a mana of any color, but it also can tap for colorless mana. So what this feels to me kind of like is almost like a pain land in a way, but instead of taking life as a resource, it's taking energy as a resource. And once you don't need to do that anymore, then you just tap it for colorless mana. So it's kind of like no harm, no foul, right? Now, if you're going to want to splash a 3rd color, for example, this is actually pretty cool. I think that's really what it's for. If you're in the business to trying to splash something, you'll play this, you'll be happy. It might eat a few pieces of energy, but at some point it will become irrelevant, and you'll have your mana base, and you can just use it for colorless mana, and it will be just fine. It won't be a huge drain, hopefully, on your resources. Inventor's Fair. I actually think this card is pretty cool. In limited, it's not for every limited deck. If you have a lot of artifacts, though, you could find some value here. I mean, gaining a little bit of life, especially if you're up against an aggressive deck, can be okay. But more importantly, if you have a good target that is like a big game-winning bomb, for example, that's an artifact, and you're comfortable in the fact that you're going to have the requirements to go and get it, then tutoring for that card could be very good for you. Same thing in Standard. If you have a deck that's really artifact-based, tutoring is always powerful. It's going to be even more powerful in that situation. So if that's the case, it could see play there. Sequestered Stash. This is actually kind of an interesting card. I do like the fact that you kind of mill yourself, but then you can take any of the artifacts from your graveyard and put one on top of your library. If you already have a target in your graveyard, you can use this to try to get it back, so you kind of know what you're getting. It takes away the variance a little bit. So I think that's pretty cool. Again, to use this in limited, you're going to want to be all in on artifacts. Like, you want to make sure you have targets for this thing. And you also want to make sure you're not trying to go too deep in colors. Now, if you are going too deep in colors and you still want this effect, then that's fine. Just count it as a spell and not part of your land base. So again, not for every limited deck, but it definitely has a role for sure. Alright, that brings us to the last cycle of cards for the day, and it's a rare enemy colored land cycle, and this is actually pretty awesome. This is the enemy version of the cards we saw in Scars of Mirrodin, which were, of course, allied color versions of what we kind of refer to slang-wise as fast lands. The reason we call them fast lands is because when they enter the battlefield, they'll be tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands. Now, in Modern, for example, you hear about these a little bit, but sometimes they get drowned out by like all the fetch lands and shock lands and filter lands, but these actually do see a fair amount of play in Modern. I mean, if you're trying to go fast, if your deck's really concerned about trying to have a fast start, these lands are kind of nice because they come in untapped, and now later, sure, they come into play tapped, but hopefully at that point it won't matter quite as much. It just depends on what your deck's trying to do. And because of that, a lot of aggressive decks and stuff will run these style of cards. And the fact that we've never had the enemy colors have influenced deck building a little bit, and this is going to open up some more doors in Modern. I also think these are going to be great for you in Standard. And now Limited, of course, like any rare dual land, if you happen to be in the colors, cool. If you're not in the colors or splashing one of the colors, then okay, it just sits in your sideboard. But there are times you'll be happy to open one of these. Although it's not necessarily adding direct power level to your deck, there is something to be said about not having to worry quite as much about your mana base. So having said that, let's look at these cards quickly. This is Blooming Marsh. This is the Golgari version for, of course, black and green. Botanical Sanctum for Simic. Concealed Courtyard for Orzhov. Inspiring Vantage for Boros. And finally, Spire Bluff Canal for Izzet. I must add too, the art is beautiful on all of those. They did a really great job with the art on these cards. And nice to see the cycle complete. That's actually pretty awesome. Having said that, guess what? We made it. We got through the entire set. So first off, hey, thank you for watching. If you've watched the whole thing and stuck with me, I appreciate it. These are always a lot of work and really hard to do. So I do them because A, they're fun, and also too, I hopefully can help some folks out there. I know when I look at over 200 cards or close to 300 cards sometimes, that obviously I'm going to miss some things. My evaluations always won't be 100%, or I'll misread something here and there. But overall, hopefully my opinion at least prompts you to think about the cards and maybe make up your own opinion. Ultimately, I think it's important to play with the cards that you love in Magic. I mean, a lot of times I've played with weaker cards that I just enjoyed and probably did better with them because I'm just more familiar with their interactions and all the things that they possibly can do. So always keep that in mind ultimately when you're building a deck, or you're brewing, or you're trying to play limited draft or something like that. Having said that, we're going to be back tomorrow with a pre-release primer, and you may have noticed, like I said at the top of the show, we haven't talked about inventions yet, so we are going to save that for tomorrow. And now until then, as always, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality content for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.